Okay, hi everybody. Renegade 67, I think, here with a tier list of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Rush Duels. I've been playing a lot of Rush Duels, been king of games for a while, and I just thought I'd share my thoughts on what I think all the best decks are in order. This isn't necessarily like based on what's actually popular. There are some decks I think are pretty strong that aren't necessarily that popular. It's just based on my own experiences. I know there have been some tournaments, not really keeping up with that, so I don't know necessarily all what people are playing. One thing I do know that is definitely popular is it not on the first screen? Where is it? Here we go. We're gonna start with Dragon Caster up in top of A plus. Because it's based more on my just perspective rather than any kind of usage data. That's why I'm using like letters instead of numbers. But if you want, you could think of like A tier as tier 1, B tier as tier 2, C tier as tier 3, and D tier as jank, I guess. So I think most people understand that Dragoncaster is strong, but in case you don't really get what makes it strong, or if you just don't know what Rush Duels are and you just happen to be watching me because I'm me, in which case, hey, thanks, that's cool. Dragoncaster combines, the main benefit is that it combines Multi-Strike Dragon Dragius with Seven's Road Magician paired with Seven's Road Witch. And like, those are basically the two best things you can be doing in the format. Is summoning Dragius, because he threatens an effective 5,000 damage through 2 attacks. The 2 attacks do so many things. It threatens 5,000 damage, which is so much. It can clear 2 decent-sized threats to like 15k plus mons with like 1 mon, which is great. And it can break stall. So if your opponent's setting 3 passing, you can break that and deal some amount of damage through. Which all those are great things that all come from it just attacking twice, which is amazing. And then the other best thing you can be doing is cheating out Seven's Road Magician with Seven's Road Witch. Seven's Road Magician by himself, he's good. He's a good 2 tribute monster. You set up your deck right, he can hit really hard, and you can win damage races that way, and that's great. And he easily clears 2500s, of course, which is the name of the game. But what makes him really strong is when you pair him with Seven's Road Witch. Because Seven's Road Witch kind of turns it into a 1 tribute monster that summons out like 3 tributes worth of monsters, right? Because Seven's Road Witch costs 1 tribute, and then you can discard any card from your hand. Doesn't have to be a level 4 or lower monster. It could be a level 5 higher monster, it could be a spell or trap, to summon the Seven's Road Magician. So, at worst, you're basically turning Seven's Road Magician into a 1 tribute, which is already great. But it's much better than that because you can fix for consistency. You can discard another high level monster, or a spell or trap, like I said. So that's why these are like the 2 best things you can be doing in the format, is summoning Dragius and cheating out Seven's Road Magician. And this deck does both. So that's why it's basically just the best thing you can be doing in the format right now. There's a few different ways you can fill out the lower level slots. There's the Mystic Dealer package, there's the Seahorse Carrier package, there's just 1500 good stuff. I think those are all viable options. You probably can mix and match those 3. And regardless of what you go with, as long as you got the Seven's Road Magician, Seven's Road Witch, Dragius, the one of Summon Skull, you've probably got a pretty competent list. Top of A plus tier list. It really is the consistency you get from Seven's Road Witch that I'd say makes this the best deck in the format right now. Because other decks have like a similar number of power plays, but like they take 2 tributes. And Seven's Road Witch gets to turn one of their big power plays into a 1 tribute play. And it's like super powerful, because again, you get a 1 tribute and 2 tributes just for 1 tribute. That's great. So that's top of A+. Not much more to say about that. Maybe I'll say more in comparison. Next deck, I think I actually ordered these in advance, and when I was clearing the order, it went in reverse. So, oops, I think I might have spoiled the order. But, that's okay. Next up, we got Dragonic Resonance. That's the name. Dragonic Resonance is super duper good because Dragius, for one thing, you get to just play Dragius, and that's always great. But also, the skill just does so much for you. It does so much for you. It gives an effective plus 1,000 every turn, which is great because a lot of skills will just do like plus 500 or something. This is plus 1,000. It's flexible in how you spread it out. Because a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, you can give this boost to this specific mon. But this, with this skill, it's that as long as you control an Earth Dragon, as long as you control that type of mon, you can give the boost to any of your dragons, which is great because even though Twin Edge Dragon, for example, is not a Earth Dragon, you can give the 500 boost to Twin Edge Dragon, And that way, with it, when it attacks twice, it gives you another way to break defensive boards. Because Dragius does that, obviously, but Twin Edge hits the 1500 mark, so he breaks the 1400, which is the highest normal defense stat in level 4 lower monsters. So you can break through and deal definite damage that way too, on top of Dragius, on top of Dragonic Pressure, which is the best spell in the format for sure. Discard 3 dragon monsters, and then you just blow up the board. You can get in for a definite amount of damage. If you set pressure already, then you have like an upwards of, I believe, 4,800 damage you can be doing in one turn, which is great. You get your opponent down like just a little bit of life points. You can kill them out of nowhere. Even if you can't kill them, you can use it as just a board cleanup. Normally you could only get 2 monsters if you have pressure from hand, because you'd get the one that you're summoning back, and then whatever your last card was in hand. But if you have Slugger and Pitcher, you can actually just fill up your board based on that. And if you have it like set on field, you can fill up your board even without Slugger and Pitcher. And so it resets board it reestablishes board presence. It helps fix brick hands. If you have a bunch of just high-level dragons in your hand, it can help fix that. So it does so many things good. This deck never struggles with clearing the 2500 mark. That's the one thing Dragius normally struggles a bit with, is that it can't clear 2500, which is why it's good to pair it with 7-Zero Magician, because it hits over so well with Dragoncaster. But also in this deck, aside from Dragius, which is the only thing you can't boost with the 500 boost, everything else, all your 1 tributes and 2 tributes will cleanly hit over the 2500 mark, because your 23s become 28s, your 21 Fire Guardian becomes 26, your Gravity Press Dragon, which is 15, becomes 2000, with its discard, effectively becomes 2700. So they all clear 2500s, so you never have an issue with 2500s. And even Phantom Bind, even though it's super popular in the format right now, you have like the best out in the format through Dragonic Slayer. Draco Slayer? What's his name again? Slayer. He just clears back row, which is great. Not just for Phantom Bind, but especially for Phantom Bind. So I think you can make an argument that this is the best deck in the format. The reason I would say that I put it below Dragoncaster is the consistency. I think specifically because of the introduction of Seahorse Carrier, I actually do think that changes the math a bit. I think before Seahorse Carrier, I think I probably would put Dragonic Resonance as the best deck. But after Seahorse Carrier, I think things are different, because it just increases the aggression of other decks, right? And it's something that Dragonic Resonance can't take advantage of. They don't get to have the Seahorse Carrier package, but so many other decks do. And that changes the math, because Dragonic Resonance, one of its weaknesses is it's bad defensively. Like, if you set 3 and pass in a lot of other decks, you could expect some 1400 defenders, maybe. That's not normally the case in Resonance. You can play a couple Tiny the Draco the Tiny? That's the name. You can play a couple Draco the Tiny if you want for some 1400 defenders, but a lot of the time, the defense stat maxes out at the 1300, or 1200 with Winged Dragon Guardian of the Fortress. So it's pretty easy to clear that, even if you're not running the 1500. So if you're facing Luke, you can generally confidently clear their board. And the other weakness of Resonance, which has to do with, Slugger Pitcher not being as good as Seahorse Carrier, if you only have one of them in rotation, you can be a little bricky, right? Because you want to run your Slayers, you want to run your Dragius, and you want to run maybe Piercing Bunker, one of, two of... Depends on how much you are trying to hate against Phantom Bind, what your ratios of Slayer versus Bunker are, I would say. But you're going to run a decent number of high-level monsters, and once you get Slugger and Pitcher in rotation, it's fine, it's not that bricky, but until you get to that point, in the early game, if you get unlucky, you can definitely brick if you haven't set up your Slugger and Pitcher. And that's a problem. And it's also a problem of maybe you can draw your pressures at the wrong time, and you might be forced to use one when you don't want to. Just the general aggression that is incurred because of Seahorse Carrier is the reason that I would say that this loses a bit more now than it used to, is because it does sometimes need those setup turns, and Seahorse Carrier sometimes just speeds up that clock just enough that Dragonic Resonance can't get off to the races. It's still amazing, it's still great, it's still definitely A+ worthy, but sometimes just a little too slow to convert because of the presence of Seahorse Carrier and just the general speed up of every other deck for the most part. Okay, so A-. Moving into A-, we're going to go with... these are not all actually ordered in order, because the next one is not this. This is Psychic Surge. We'll be talking about that in a bit. No, the next one for A- is Climax Beat. Top of A-. This is a deck that I feel is so close to me calling it A+. I feel like when Climax Beat draws well, I probably would call it the best deck. But it has consistency issues. There's another deck that does not get to run Seahorse Carrier, and it doesn't get to run Slugger Pitcher either. So it can have it has consistency problems, not even just getting to the high end, which is the normal consistency problem a deck might have, but it also has things like you never want to draw your one of Climax Finale or your one of Lullabind, but sometimes you just do. Sometimes you draw both, that sucks. You need to make sure you run a high level of level 2 monsters, so you can actually summon them to actually search out your Climax Finale and Lullabind. And if you run max, which at the moment means you're running 9 of them, you should generally see your level 2s when you need them, but sometimes you don't. And because you're running so many level 2s, you need to make sure you run a decent number of high level monsters, but as I already said, you can't run Seahorse Carrier. The only thing you get as a consistency boost in terms of turbo to higher level monsters is Roman's Pick, and you only get one of that, and that's not really consistent enough. And so you're going to sometimes brick on your high levels, but you need those high levels. Like specifically, you probably want to run, you can debate this, but you probably want to run 3 Prima Guitarna and 3 Folder Blitz, because Folder Blitz is really good at, like, if you combined, like, the main way this deck kills, like, it can take you from 6,000 to 0 easily in one turn once you get to the late game. You can, like, use Climax Finale, summon a level 2, get the Climax Finale, the same Climax Finale, back from the graveyard, activate it again, and that combined with Folder Blitz, which is almost certainly going to be online because you'll have just pumped your life points down a lot, is usually enough to kill your opponent, like, from 6,000, mostly regardless of your board, your opponent's board. If they're, like, you know, if they're above 6,000 because of, like, a Dying Keto setup or something, then maybe you're not in range, but once you get to the late game, you can generally just kill in one turn with this. So, but you really usually you want Folder Blitz for that. Now, Prima Guitarna can do it too if you have the life points to spare, but when you get down low, it conflicts, because Climax Finale is a steep life point cost in the late game, and Guitarna is also a life point cost, and so they can conflict, which is why you want the Folder Blitz, but when you have a lot of life points, or in the early mid-game stages, you really want the Guitarna instead, because Folder Blitz isn't really doing a lot. So you really want 3 of both, but that's bricky. And so, like, it just gets awkward where, you know, between the Lullabind, the Climax Finale, the level 2s, your high levels, you're sometimes just not going to draw well. I feel like when you do draw well, I do think this is probably the best deck. It has the most consistent win rate from my experience. It's hard to pilot. I would definitely say it's hard to pilot. You need to be able to do math well to play well with this deck. Because when you do your big Climax Finale combos, your life points are going way, way down. And so if you don't win that turn, you probably lose on your opponent's turn. So you need to be able to math out in advance if you actually have the lethal. And if you don't have the lethal, how much do you hedge against that sort of thing. But otherwise, yeah, this deck is super strong as long as you play well and think fast. Don't lose to the timer. I've lost to the timer a couple times because it took me too long to see the line. That happens more than any other deck with this deck. I gotta get better about that. But yeah, this is a very strong deck. Very strong deck. I think it's favored against basically everything when it draws well, but it draws not well a bit too often. I think it just needs some consistency tools to push it over the edge. But still a very strong deck. Top of A- for sure, in my opinion. Next up, we're gonna go with Dark Arts Celerity, I believe is what this is called. Yes, Dark Arts of Celerity. So Dark Arts Celerity is a strong deck. It, you summon your Yami Ruler, and you annoy your opponent because they can't summon their level 7 or higher stuff, and that matters for a lot of decks. The main thing that can cheat around it is 7-Zord Witch into 7-Zord Magician, which Dragoncaster has, another one of the reasons they're the best deck. There are other ways of outing it. There's Lullabind, which Climax Speed has. There's just destroying it with Dragonic Pressure, which Resonance has. Resonance also just naturally clears 2,500 with their 1 Tributes, which is another good thing about Resonance. But there are a lot of decks that do just not have a good answer, and even decks that have answers aren't always necessarily going to have those answers. Except for Climax Beat, it will probably almost always have its answer. But then again, even with Climax Beat, you need a way to clear the 2,500 even once you've set it face down, which usually means using your Finale, which can be a bit awkward, or using Prima Guitarna. So even if they can out it easily, they can out the lock easily. It doesn't mean they can out the Yami Ruler easily. So Yami Ruler it's good at annoying folks. And generally what happens is after you annoy them like that, they'll end up setting 3 and passing just so they can wait till next turn to make their big plays. And when they do that, you can summon Kime Ruler and he gets a free attack in, and you combine that with maybe a Pierce, and you've done just about enough damage to just win off of that. So it's a strong deck, very strong. It's definitely gotten a bit better with the Seahorse Carry package because it can run that, and it's a great consistency boost because you do probably want to run 3 Yame Ruler, 3 Kime Ruler, but 6 level 2 or higher tributes definitely gets bricky if you don't have something like Seahorse Carrier. So Seahorse Carrier, the fact that this deck can run it, helps a lot. And that's mostly it. I don't have much special to say about it. The main reason I don't have this deck higher is because, again, it can be a bit bricky in comparison. Like, it has Seahorse Carrier, but it's not as consistent as 7-Zero Witch summoning out. And again, sometimes the opponent just has the out for Yami Ruler, and then your game plan folds a bit. The other big thing about this deck is that because you can choose to turn your opponent's monsters to defense position, like once per turn if you set up the Dark Arts Celerity, it's great for comboing with the Pierce, but also it's great for, if the opponent only has like 1 attack position monster, it's great for setting up your Kime Ruler play. So if they want to like play around your Kime Ruler play, they have to put like 2 monsters in attack position, but that's just opening them up to taking up a lot of damage even without you attacking directly. So that's another really good thing, another really good thing about this deck and how it can, just push damage through. So yeah, it's a good deck. It's definitely a good deck. A-, but sometimes the opponents just have the out. Sometimes you brick just a little too much, and that's the main reason this isn't higher. If the best deck was not a deck that had an out to this deck, it would probably be a better deck than it is right now. But the best deck, Dragoncaster, does just cleanly out it with the 7-Zero Witch. So that's why it can't really go much higher than this, I would say. Next up, we got Psychic Surge. Psychic Surge. Nope. Why do I always call this Psychic Surge? It's Psychic Drive. I always call this Psychic Surge. The name is Psychic Drive. So Psychic Drive is probably of all the decks we've talked about so far, has gotten the biggest boost because of Seahorse Carrier. Psychic Drive, I would say, is the best deck at taking advantage of the Gatarna plus Twin Edge Dragon combo. I talked about a little bit with Twin Edge Dragon with the Resonance deck, where it can be boosted to 1500. But the Gatarna Twin Edge Dragon is a very specific combo that, well, for starters, it boosts Twin Edge Dragon above 15. It goes straight to 19, which matters sometimes. For one thing, it makes an effective damage of the Twin Edge Dragon of 3800, which is great. You could say it's 2900 if you discount the one boost, the one normal boost from Gatarna. But also it can just act as the board breaker, the same as in the Resonance deck. But you get to run, so yeah, you get to run those as board breakers, which is great. But also, this deck has just so much. The reason I say this is the best deck to run with the Gatarna plus Twin Edge combo, because there is Gatarna Dragons. I don't know if that's the official name of the deck. That's what I generally refer to it as, where you get Dragius and Twin Edge, and you both pair those with Gatarna. The reason I would say that this is generally a better deck, and we'll talk about that deck when we get to it, is that it's got a big boost in consistency because of the skill, the Psychic Drive skill, letting you get back a level 2 from your graveyard. It effectively turns Gatarna into a 1 tribute monster. Now, you do need the 2 tributes in advance to get it, but if you get that, then you get your 1 card back for free, and that's great. It's not as good as 7-Zero Witch, but it's still pretty good, and if you add that to Seahorse Carrier and the one Romance pick you're playing, you get so much consistency. So you can actually, afford to, run 3 Gatarna, 3 Folder Blitz, and not really worry about bricking that often, which is nice, and it just means you get consistent, really good Gatarna pushes. That's the other thing, is that to get Gatarna, another monster, and a Twin Edge on field with a discard is 6 cards worth, and, Psychic Drive gives you that 6 card to do it, but now also Seahorse Carrier gives you that 6 card to do it, and so that could even turn into a 7th card, or an 8th card. And so it's just a really strong combo that is put over the edge because of Seahorse Carrier, and can really go in for a lot of damage. It also does not struggle clearing the 2500 mark, because the Psychic Drive boost will push Gatarna over 25, it'll push Folder Blitz over 25, it pushes Psy Stage Bouncer to 24, and with Thunder the Thunder's help that gets over 25. You can also choose to run, what's his name? Sonic. He's the other image in the art. Sonic something or Turber Derber. Sonic Attacker. That's the name. I actually wrote some of these down so I wouldn't forget them. I forgot it anyway, but I could remember. Yeah, Sonic Attacker. I think Sonic Attacker is okay in this deck. This is the only deck where I'd say it's probably okay because it does beat 2500. It is definitely weak defensively. It can sometimes kind of be cute in combo with Folder Blitz because it's not as easy to activate Folder Blitz in this deck as it is in Climax Beat. But it also just puts them up on life points, and it's really weak defensively. So, you know, there's a debate there, but it can be okay in this deck. This deck's main weakness, the reason I wouldn't put it higher, is that it definitely has a weakness to Phantom Bind. This deck kills really hard and fast, so sometimes you can do it when your graveyard isn't that loaded up with Psychics, and you can hit over it with like a Gatarna boost, and you can just ignore their Phantom Bind, but this deck definitely has a weakness to Phantom Bind. It's not like Climax Beat where you can just turn their stuff face down with Lullaby and mostly ignore their Phantom Binds. In this deck, Phantom Bind is definitely a real concern, and you can build your lower levels to be kind of Psychic free, but only to a point because you need some level 2 Psychics. And, you know, combined with your high levels being mostly Psychics, Phantom Bind can become an actual issue in the late game. So that's one of the big reasons this isn't higher, I would say. And also just having more impactful 1 tributes would be nice. Like, again, Side Stage Bouncer needs the help of Thunder the Thunder to clear the 2500 mark. It would be nice if you could do that without it. Oh, that's another thing. With the Dark Heart's Celerity deck, because you can pretty much always turn them on to defense position, I was going to say Umagumi clears 2500. No, it doesn't, but it does turn things to defense position, and then you can lower them by 500, and against most decks, 2200 against a defense position mon does clear them. Like, it's pretty much exactly Yami really would live that. So yeah, Umagumi kind of sort of clears 2500, sort of. It's just really nice to have 1 tribute monsters that clear 2500, and this deck does not do it, and it has a weakness to Phantom Bind, so that's why I would not put it higher, I would say. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much describes Psychic Drive. Obviously, you have to be... The other thing is that the big life point cost with the Katarna, this doesn't have a way to recover, and with your Psychic Drive skill, this doesn't have a way to recover life points the way Climax Beat does. So if you get too low on life points too early, it can be problematic for this deck, for sure. So that's why it's bottom of A-, I would say. It's very strong, hits hard, hits fast, but you got to be a bit careful of the life points, you got to be a bit careful of Phantom Bind, and you wish your 1 tributes were a little better. Okay, so that's it for A-. For B+, I would go, where is it? Right here. B+, top of B+, I'd go Disco Fever. Disco Fever is a good deck. It's a deck I've come around to recently. For a little bit, I thought like it just didn't clear 2500 enough, but I think what you need is the Gravity Press Dragons. Torna can switch them on to defense position, usually hit over them, and then otherwise Gravity Press with the 700 debuff puts them in a range that your 1400 and your 1200 with the 700 boost, they both clear 2500s, which is really good. And so with that consistency boost, and with Dying Keto going up to 32, this deck has a lot of good aggression. It's the best user of... it's definitely the best user of Triple Threat Thunder, because of, you know, you have so many Aquas. Even having an Aqua boss monster means it'll be pretty consistent. It generally won't brick, so when you open it, it's a great blowout card. And even without it, this deck just has pretty good aggression, and it's got some recovery with Dying Keto, so you can sometimes avoid the aggressive pushes of decks like Climax Beat, or just any Gatarna deck in general, or Dragius deck, you know, similar amount of aggression generally. The weakness, I would say, one thing I'll say is that I don't think this deck is actually that weak to Phantom Bind, which is a plus because of the popularity of Phantom Bind right now. Because Dying Keto gets so big, 3200, usually you don't have to worry that much about Phantom Bind with 3200 until you get to the really late game, I would say. And then your 1 tribute monsters, like, don't really care about Phantom Bind because none of them are Aqua, which is arguably a downside, but in this case, because of Phantom Bind, it's an upside. Like, they don't really have to worry about Phantom Bind as much. And they also filter the deck to make it so that you just generally don't have to worry about Phantom Bind as much. Now, your non-tribute monsters do have to worry about it a bit, but, like, those are the non-tribute monsters, right? So you do want to be careful with them, but you put the least amount of investment into them, so it's okay if they're a little vulnerable to Phantom Bind. And so that's why, like, it's... That's why I say it's, it's okay to be this high, because there's gonna be some other decks that are like definitely lower because of Phantom Bind. I think this deck doesn't struggle that much with Phantom Bind. What I think it does struggle with is just putting up good defensive pressure, right? Because it's only 2,500 is Dying Keto. And then the rest of the boss monsters you're running, like, they don't even reach 2,000. They're going to be like 16, 17. Most of your strong beat sticks are like 1,400, 1,200 even. And so it's not great defensive pressure. You have your 3 Dying Ketos, but you won't always see those. And otherwise, it's generally pretty easy for your opponent to clear your board and get in a lot of damage doing it. You can run some recovery, but that has its other issues. Like, you have the Dying Keto, but recovery beyond that has its other issues, I would say. And so, because of that, I'd say that's why I can't put this deck much higher than this. It has good aggression, but defensively, it's pretty vulnerable. And like, so your opponent generally doesn't have to expend much resources to clear the board, and they do a lot of damage clearing the board. And that's just a problem, because with Seahorse Carrier, which this deck uses, of course, but with Seahorse Carrier in the format, the aggression is high. And so if you don't put up a good defensive board, you're just going to be taking a lot of damage. And so it's hard for me to put this much higher than B+. It just needs more defensive pressure, which it does not have. And so at the moment, I think top of B+ is as high as I can put it. It's good, but it would like some more defensive tools, I would say. And Party is not it. Like, that's just asking for a Pierce. And it's also like a brick sometimes, because you can't, like, sometimes you just want that to be a monster, and it's just a spell, and you're sad. Next deck in B+ is, oh yeah, now we get to Gitarna Dragons. I was talking about this earlier. So, you'd think Gitarna Dragons is similar to Psychic Drive. It has a similar idea. It's Gitarna plus Twin Edge Dragon, but this one gets Dragius, so you think it would be better. But it has 2 weaknesses in comparison. First of all, it doesn't get the free Mon back that you get with Psychic Drive. Whenever you summon your Gitarna, you get a free Mon back. That's great for being able to make, large consistency pushes. You just don't get that in Gitarna Dragons. You can play Seahorse Carrier, and that helps a lot with this deck for sure. But, like, if you try to play Kiribot, that's not as good as the Psychic Drive consistency. If you try to play Slugger Pitcher, that's not as good, and conflicts with what Gitarna even wants to do. You want your low-level monsters attacking. So that's one of the problems, is that it's not as consistent. It's a bit brickier than Psychic Drive. And the other problem is that it has problems clearing 2,500. Dragius, of course, can't naturally clear it. And if your opponent, like, sits on just one 2,500 Mon, even Gitarna can't clear it. The best it can do is crash, and you do not want to crash most of the time. And obviously, you generally don't want to end your board just on a single 2,500 attack Mon. But sometimes you brick a bit. Sometimes the best you can do is just summon your 2,500 attack Mon and pray your opponent can't clear it. And Gitarna Dragons is probably the #1 deck that struggles clearing it, right? So, and you especially don't want to crash if you're crashing with Gitarna and paying 1,000, because, like, now you're 1,000 down and you had to crash. That really sucks. There are ways to clear 2,500s in the deck. You have Thunder the Thunder, which can combo, and sometimes you get Gitarna on the field at the same time as Summit Skull, or because you're Seahorse Carrier, you could get Gitarna on the same time, field at the same time as Dragius. And if that happens, you've almost won the game at that point. That's almost lethal right there. But, like, it's not consistent. A lot of the time, your best option will be to crash, and that's not a good best option. It's not a good place to be. It's super vulnerable because of the high aggression of the format, because of decks like Gitarna Dragons. There's a lot of aggression, and so because of that, it would be such a flimsy defensive board. You don't want to have to crash with 2,500s, but it happens more often than you would like, is that's something you run into, and it's so bad. It's so bad. This is a strong deck. This is definitely a strong deck. Seahorse Carrier definitely makes it more consistent, because if you ever land double Gitarna, Gitarna Dragius, double Dragius, that's so much pressure, but it's not Dragonic pressure. But it just needs better ways to clear 2,500s, which at the moment it does not have, so I can't really put it higher than low B+. Alright, next up, top of B-. We're going with Curse of the Dark. Curse of the Dark is a strong deck. It is certainly no Resonance, but it's one thing it has over Resonance is it's got better consistency. Because your big 2,300 can become 2,800 Mons. in Resonance are 2 tributes, but your 2300 becomes 2800 mon in Curse of the Dark is a 1 tribute. And, you know, it has to cycle a card from hand, but like we talk about Seven Sword Witch, it's so good to take a card from hand than it is to just take them on in field, because it can be great for fixing consistency and fixing bricks. So one thing this deck has over Resonance is a bit of consistency. It loses out in basically every other area, and so it's definitely a much worse deck. It certainly doesn't have the Slayers to cleanly out the Phantom Binds. You do have Pressure, which can sort of work as a workaround to Phantom Bind, where you can use it and destroy your opponent's monsters so that, best case, you kill through the Phantom Bind, the Phantom Bind's not enough to stop you. Worst case, they're forced to use it, and they're forced to use it to live, but that means they don't have it for follow-up plays. That's the ideal, but Pressure can still definitely screw you over with this deck because you don't have a Slayer. But it's still strong. You know, it gets Dragius. Curse of Dragon goes up to 25. You can run Thunder the Thunder, so you can clear 25s. You have Dragius, which is great. And it's just so good for consistency. What Knight of Darkness, that's his name, right? Yeah, what Knight of Darkness does for the deck. And also, even though it's less consistent that you can get your Slugger Pitcher into anything that can actually attack, because it'll just be Dragius, it's still great for resetting board presence when you use Pressure. Because without Slugger Pitcher, you're left with just 2 Mons. So with Slugger Pitcher, you can reset a full board of 3 Mons, and even though you'll have to go defensive, you're not going to be able to get any attacks in. That's basically the same with Resonance, though, because the only attacker you could get in if you went full 3 Mons with Resonance is, unless you tributed one of them. If you tributed one of them, then you could tribute for like a Gravity Press Dragon, and then getting 2 Mons and have a 3rd as defensive. But if you were just, you know, summoning a Slugger and a Pitcher and a 3rd Mon, the 3rd Mon would have to be, I didn't write this name down, the 300 attacker. And that's like, you know, you don't want to summon that and attack with it, unless that's lethal. So it's a similar position when you're trying to reset, just reset board position, is that you can't get in a free cheap shot anyways with Resonance most of the time. And so it's a similar position. It's only that with Curse of the Dark, you're going to be resetting board presence like that with Pressure a lot more, I would say. However, one benefit this has is it has, when you don't have your Slugger and Pitcher set up, this is another benefit actually it has over Resonance. When you don't have your Slugger and Pitcher set up, this has a higher kill ceiling, a higher lethal push. Because Resonance gets like 4,800 if you combine like your Slayer or Bunker with your 1,500 Dragon. But Curse of the Dark gets, if you don't have that, the best that deck can manage is 3,600 because of the 21 from, if you don't have Slugger and Pitcher set up, the best they can manage is, Resonance can manage is Fire Guardian plus the 1,500 Draco, right? Is that what it's called? It's 3,600, and if you're not even running Fire Guardian, then you can get Gravity Press Dragon and go to 4,000. So I'm a liar. But with Curse of the Dark, you can go to 4,000 as well, which is 2,000 plus 1,500, but it's better defensively. I guess that's more the point. I forgot that if you summon the Gravity Press Dragon, you can pump them both up, and then that does become 4,000, which is equivalent to the damage threshold you're doing in this deck. But in Curse of the Dark, you have a stronger defensive position, because Curse of the Dragon is 2,000 instead of the 1,500 the Gravity Press Dragon is. So it's only a minor difference, but it's a difference. But yeah, it means it has a decent kill position, and it's and you can set that up pretty easily if you get a Phoenix in rotation. So your kind of better rotation in Curse of the Dark is Phoenix as opposed to the Slugger Pitcher combo, but still, it's just a strong deck. It's just you gotta be careful of Phantom Bind. If it wasn't for Phantom Bind, this deck's probably like closer to top of B+. I don't know if it's A-, but it's certainly not B-. But speaking of decks that don't like Phantom Bind, there's 7's Excel Road. 7's Excel Road just does not like Phantom Bind. It's probably the most hated on by Phantom Bind in the whole format, I would say. 7's Excel Road is certainly a good deck. One of the good things about it is that it can afford to run a low number of high-level monsters, but still consistently get the high-level monsters when it needs them. Because of the skill's ability to, like, once per duel, search out your 7's Road and just add it to hand. Which is great for consistency, on top of the consistency 7's Road Witch just already gives you. So it's a very consistent deck, and it puts on high pressure, because not only does 7's Road hit over the 2,500 mark, But if you summon 7-0 with Witch will hit over 25. Splat always hits over 25. Torna can switch things from defense, and with 24, it'll hit over pretty much everything except for exactly Yami Ruler. But what that means is that you can pretty consistently put on a lot of damage, and you can clear your opponent's threats without much issue. And so as your 7-0 Magician is super high and your other mon is super high, it's just putting on 2 mons that are that strong with very little investment compared to whatever other decks are doing. Now, with Seahorse Carrier, other decks can sometimes match that if they high roll, but this deck doesn't need to high roll to consistently put on that much damage, which means this deck is good at winning damage races. And that's why Phantom Formation can screw it up so much, because, like, even though 7-0 Magician doesn't care that much about Phantom Bind usually, your 7-0 Witch with its 28, it'll get screwed up pretty big if it's, like, forced to go below 25 against a 2500 attacker, or, you know, Splat, 26, even worse. Torna, 24, you know, if it's switching something to defense, then it's not as bad because it won't die on the crack. It won't, like, be killed. It'll just not kill, but it's still bad to not kill a lot of the time. And, of course, you can hedge. You can hedge against, you can hedge against Phantom Bind by playing a lighter spellcaster count. But everything's a trade-off, right? Like, if you don't play Mystic Dealer, then you lose a strong consistency engine. If you don't play Dark Sorcerer, you lose your only 1500 level 4 beater in the deck. If you don't play Recovery Force, you can't recycle your 7-0 Magician in the late game if necessary. You could play Recovery Force even on a low spellcaster count, but it's really bricky in the early game, so, like, everything's a trade-off. If you play super heavy spellcasters, then Phantom Bind just screws you even more. If you play light spellcasters, you still need to be careful of some of those small margins, and it's just generally a worse build than the version that just goes heavy spellcasters, except when you're facing exactly Phantom Bind. Because Phantom Bind is so popular, though, is it better to go light spellcasters? It's a debate. I think it is generally a worse deck if you're not running into exactly Phantom Bind, but if you're running into Phantom Bind, you definitely want the light spellcaster version. Yeah, I'd say there's no winning, and that's why I'm putting this deck as low as I am. It's certainly, I think it's probably an A-tier worthy deck if Phantom Bind wasn't as popular as it is, but it is popular, and this deck just, it needs to win those damage races, because it's similar to, it's actually a bit similar to Disco Fever, in that it leaves pretty vulnerable boards. It generally doesn't run 2500s. It's even more vulnerable than Disco Fever usually, so it's pretty easy for your opponent to clear the board and do a lot of damage. So the fact that you do high damage, like, matters. You need to be out damaging them. And your best play actually puts 2 vulnerabilities into the board. A 16 and 21 is food for Dragius. You know, in the late game, if you're low on life points, you might just want to set 2 and just summon the 7-0 Magician and set the others. But that hurts your best play. It means you can't do your best play. But if Phantom Bind is screwing up with the math, or worse, causing you to lose your monster, and it just does screw up with that math so much. And so that's why I really can't put this higher than that, because it needs to win those damage races, and Phantom Bind causes it to lose the damage race, and it makes it just, the defensive vulnerability becomes so much more large. So that's a big problem with 7-6 Road. Great deck, really doesn't like the state of the meta with the Phantom Binds. Next up, in B-, we're going to go Tengu Formation. This is a deck that's really, really boosted by Seahorse Carrier. Seahorse Carrier has boosted a lot of decks, but this one especially. This was almost a meme beforehand, just because it had nothing good to run in the lower levels. Like, your best option was generally running Currybots, the Slugger Pitcher package, and being like, I hope that's enough. And Currybot's only okay, and Slugger Pitcher, like, actively conflict with Tengu, because one of the best things about the deck is that Tengu consistently clears 2500s. You know, 1 tributes that clear 2500 are great. The other good thing is that this deck has a deceptively large amount of damage, because, like, Gaia hits for 3100 effectively, and Max Raider hits for 3200 effectively, and those are pretty strong numbers. So you can, like, you don't have to worry that much about Phantom Bind, because your ratios of warriors are and winged beasts are relatively low, and because, you know, because the 800 attack sink is so much that you usually don't have to worry that much about Phantom Bind. And you hit pretty hard. Your Tengu clears 1 tribute consistently. It has a Seahorse Carrier package, which most decks are playing at this point at the moment anyways. And so it's just, because now that it has a good level 4 lower package, it just helps so much with the deck's ability to put on the pressure, which is really good. And it's just good. It's good now that it has a good level 4 lower like lineup that it can run. Is really what's put it into B tier contention, I would say. You can either run, like, in addition to your Max Raider and your Gaia, you're probably going to either run Kime Ruler to do the pot shots when they're all being defensive, or run Yami Ruler plus Pierce. You can also run Pierce when you have Kime Ruler, but you kind of for sure need it if you're running the Yami Ruler version, because you don't have any other way to force damage through. But with the Yami Ruler version, you can just annoy them, put them in defense position. Yami Ruler is just generally a good card, but Kime Ruler is the more consistent way to push damage through if they're stalling. You can combine it with either one of them. I'd say probably using both is inconsistent, and you just want to pick whichever one you prefer generally, I would say. But yeah, Tengu formation can do either one, Blue Falcon formation, and it's good. It's good. It doesn't struggle that much with Thanabind. The deceptively hits hard. Tengu clears 2500, and that's great. You want to clear 2500. That's the name of the game. Right, bottom of B-, we're going to put Magician's Shuffle. So, Magician Shuffle is a deck that has very flexible in how you can build it. So, I guess to clarify exactly what I'm talking about, the way I think the best way to build Magician Shuffle is right now is running the Katarna Twin Edge package, because it's just such a strong package, and supplementing it with 7 Zord Magicians, because that lets you beat the 2500 mark more consistently. You can't really afford to struggle with the 2500 mark like the Katarna Dragons can. But one thing you can get away with running, more high level monsters, because Dark Magician Girl is only a 1 tribute, whereas if you have if you have 3 Dragius and you have 3 Katarna for Katarna Dragons, fitting in 7 Zoro Magician as well it's so bricky on high levels. But this deck, because Dark Magician Girl is only a 1 tribute, you can afford to run more high levels, and I think that's probably the best way to build it right now. And like that, it's okay. Having consistent 1 tributes that are 2500 attackers is alright. I'd say clearing 2500 is generally more important. But having consistent 2500s is still okay. It's okay. It's okay. It really wants to clear 2500 more than it wants to be 2500. And so you get sad sometimes. And, the offensive pressure can be a bit lacking. You're running Katarna with Twin Edge, but man, do you wish you could, fit Dragius or something in this deck. This deck definitely has the potential to get a lot better, though, with more support, because its skill is so flexible. But at the moment, it's just missing some oomph that it really wants, and it doesn't have that oomph. It needs the oomph. It doesn't have the oomph. If you could run just a heavier spellcaster package, that would be one option, but that's so weak to Phantom Bind, so I do think the best way is to do 7 Zoro Magician as a supplement, but that's probably the only spellcaster you run in the deck, only other one, aside from Dark Magician Girl. And you focus on the Katarna Twin Edge package, and I found it to be good. It's good. It's alright. Consistent Summon Skull, better than Summon Skull. Better defense is good, but only barely B-, I would say. So top of C+. Top of C+, we're going to put Servant of Dawn. So Servant of Dawn is similar to Blue Falcon formation. They're both helped a lot by the Seahorse Carrier package. They both run Gaia the Fierce Knight. The main difference is that Servant of Dawn gets to run the best Summon Skull in the format, because it's 2500 that just boosts to beat over 2500s, which is amazing. Dark Magician Girl really wishes she had that. And it gets to run Dragius. And it also gets to run a consistent way to beat over 2500s with Gaia the Fierce Knight. And that's all great. That's you get Dragius, you get a great Summon Skull. That's just better than Blue Falcon formation. The main reason that I just can't put this higher than top of C+, is because you are forced to run 2 Cursive Dragons that are just so bad in this deck. They just don't do anything. You need to run them. The skill requirement is you have to run them, but they don't proc the skill, and they don't natively natively do not do enough. And if you have the Gaia or the Summon Skull, which can actually proc the skill, is the Gaia or Summon Skull. At the moment, I think it's just exactly those, basically. If you have the Gaia and Summon Skull that can proc the skill, then you're already beating over 2500. So it's not like boosting Cursive Dragon to 2600 means anything, right? So when it's just a 2000, when you need the 2500 clear, Cursive Dragon's not that. And it's just you want it to be better, and it's not. And it's such a problem, because if you run too many if you want to run more impactful 1 tributes or 2 tributes because Cursive Dragon doesn't do enough, then you're just bricking yourself, because these Cursive Dragons, you have to run them, and they're 1 tributes. If they were level 4 lower, you could at least afford to run a couple bricks that are level 4 lower, and you're like, I'll just tribute them away, I don't care how weak they are. Cursive Dragon being 1 tribute means just, you can't really afford that, because if you play more higher levels, you just brick, and that's bad. You don't want to brick, and so you either brick, or you just don't run enough power cards, and sometimes your only power card is Cursed Dragon, which is not a real power card. And it's too often enough that it's such an inconsistency that I cannot put this into B tier. I just can't. It top of C+. It high rolls, of course. Its high roll is better than Tengu Formation for sure. But those Cursed Dragons make you so sad when that's your only power card, because it's not a real power card. But sometimes that's all you got to work with, and you get sad. Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad. Could be better. This is also a skill that's kind of flexible. If we like. It needs to be a legend monster exactly, or a 2100 defender, so it's very specific in what you can use to proc it. But if we can somehow get a 2100 defending 1 tribute monster, I mean, our 1 tribute monster with 2000 defense right now is 0 attack, so it's not likely. I don't know, maybe there's potential, maybe not. Maybe Cursed Dragon will forever break your deck, but you know, it's okay. It's okay. Top of C+. There's worse decks. Speaking of worst decks, so Lightning Shift is probably a lot better than this. Lightning Shift probably deserves to be a B tier deck, maybe even an A tier deck, but like so far, I am just a pay-to-win player. Nope, the opposite of what I just said. I am just a free-to-play player. I have not spent any real money on this game so far. Maybe I will in future, but for now I haven't. And this deck, so all I can talk about is my experience with the free-to-play version of this deck. I know that the pay-to-win is much better, because you get your 3rd Lightning Volt Condor, you get your 3rd Torna, you get your 3rd Luminous... Luminous Parrot, you get your 3rd Crested Hawk, especially Volt Condor, Torna, and Luminous Parrot you want 3 of. You maybe want 3 Crested Hawk, but 3 Volt Condor especially. Because if you have 1 and discard the other, that's such a huge value play. And having 3 makes that so much more likely to ever come up than having 2 does. And so that's just why, like, the free-to-play version is just... It's just not there. Like, it's fine. You'll have your high roll turns. You generally don't have to worry much about Phantom Bind. Even though you're, like, locked into... You're not actually locked to just Spellcasters and Winged Beast. No, you could play the Seer's Carrier package. I don't know if that's good in the free-to-play version, just because you're already playing so many lights, and so it's like, I feel like if you could take out the 7-Zero Magician, because if you could like max out on Lightning Volt Condor, you could probably afford to take out the 7-Zero Magician, and then you don't really care about your attribute variety, and then you could probably play Seahorse Carrier, and that sounds really strong, but as is, like, you kind of have to play 7-Zero Magician, and so, like, you need to care about your attributes, and you're already playing so many lights, and so if you play more lights, I don't think you're going to have the attributes to even make 7-Zero Magician good consistently. And so it's just tough. It's tough. You gotta play 7-Zero Magician in the free-to-play version, I would say. And 7-Zero Magician is a good card. He'll consistently clear 2,500. Lightning Volt Condor, if he gets his skill off, consistently clears 2,500. Crested Hawk will always clear 2,500. And you don't have to worry about... You usually don't have to worry about Phantom Bind because of how high you're clearing 2,500 by. So Phantom Bind generally doesn't bug you. But even despite that, like... It's just, like, some of the plays are just so undervalued, and because like, Lightning Volt Condor only gets back from the graveyard, so having only 2 Luminous Parrot means you're not as consistently even having that in the graveyard, and like, because like, you only have 1 high-level light monster you're going to be playing in the deck, which is the other Lightning Volt Condor, which you probably don't have in hand, your actually best matchups are against dark monsters, and there are some good dark monsters in the format for sure, so sometimes you, like, discard a Crested Hawk or a 7-Zero Magician and you super high roll, but sometimes they just have light monsters. And ironically, this deck is not the best against only light decks, because if they're like just playing, like if they have just like 1 or 2 light monsters and that's it, you cannot use the skill. So you do not get the free +1. You can't get the card back from the graveyard if you can't change their attribute to light. Which, like, if you can't get the free +1, then you're going neg, and going neg with, like, Volt Condor doesn't feel good usually. Seahorse Carrier may help offset the neg, but, you know, maybe a version of Volt Condor that doesn't even use the Lightning Shift skill could be better, but I've mostly just experimented with the free-to-play, you know, Lightning Shift version, and it just struggles. It just struggles. I'm sure, you know, if you had more consistency with triple Torna for board breaking, triple Luminous Parent, triple Lightning Volt Condor especially, this is probably a B tier deck at least. But based on my testing, bottom of C+. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. There are worse decks. It's not great. So then, top of C-. Diabolic Beetle, top of C-. So Diabolic Beetle is good in the late game. It's great in the late game. It clears 2500 consistently once it gets to the late game because, Beetle will just put itself up above that. And it can also put Dragius above that. And, it has a similar mentality to Guitarno Dragons where, Beetle plus Dragius, only this takes one less tribute, is just so strong. But you need to actually get there, right? And that's part of the problem with this deck, is that it's the big problem. It's the problem with the deck, is it's got such a bad early game, right? Especially if you go second. If you go second and you don't open Dragius, you are so sad. You probably can't clear much of your opponent's board. If you can clear it, you might have to, waste a Beetle to clear it, and you don't want to waste your Beetles. You might be able to clear one monster. Because they're all, mostly you're just running 0 attack monsters, so you can't clear their board usually. And they get to establish such a big board and probably get in for first damage. If you go first, then maybe you're okay, but, you have to play at your opponent's pace, right? If your opponent has a weak opening, they brick, so many other decks can punish that easier than this deck can, because this deck is lacking, the beat sticks that could just, you get your one high-level play, and then you get your low-level monsters, you get your high-level play to maybe, out whatever their, 2500 was, and then you can attack directly with both of your low levels, but you just don't have that in this deck. So you can't pressure them if they bricked, and if you bricked, they can pressure you. And if you have a slow start, or if you're forced to keep up with your opponent's fast start, your Beetle might not be at 2500 yet. It might not be there, and so you can't out it, and so it's just ugh. And you can't really play the Seahorse Carrier package in the deck. I guess you could play a really small one, but that would hurt the consistency of your level 1s. How many level 1s you would want. And if you don't want Seahorse Carrier, well, Seahorse Carrier, how I was saying that you could say, oh, it's like Guitarno Dragons, but this does it for one less tribute. Well, Seahorse Carrier kind of can sometimes make up for that. It's got a good high roll. It's got great high roll. And once you get to the late game, it's got a good matchup. It just struggles to get there sometimes. It can get so easily rolled over in the early game, especially because of Seahorse Carrier now. So, yeah, top of C-. It just needs more aggression in the early game, and it doesn't have it. And so it's hard to punish bricks, but your bricks will be punished. And so it's just sad. Okay, next up, speaking of sad, this makes me sad. Explosion Drive. I'm sad. I want this to be higher. This is the deck I got Cog with. I got King of Games with Explosion Drive. The reason is that it's relatively budget friendly. Most other decks, you want to run 3 of one of the URs. This deck, your main boss monster is a super rare, an SR, and I got my third Full Meteor Impact early, so I was able to make a build around deck. But it's good at the lower levels, but once you get high up, it has so many problems. First of all, Full Meteor Impact, for one thing, it's got 0 defense, so it hates being switched to defense position. But also, it doesn't have an effect. Its effect is that it can boost to 3000 attack, and that's nice. That's about it. Its actual effect never comes up. It just never comes up. It sucks to be playing a 2 tribute vanilla monster just so it can be boosted by 500 attack. Because, in that case, you could be playing Blue Falcon formation. You can play a 2400, but it gets boosted by 800 attack effectively. That's way better. So, the 25 that boosts to 3000 is also, it's the only neat thing the deck does, despite the fact the effect never comes up. It is the one neat thing the deck does, especially before Disco Fever came out. And we got, another way to boost a 25 to 3000 naturally, consistently, because Summon Skull and Servant of Dawn is not a consistent boost. This was the only way consistently to boost a 25 over the 25 mark before Disco Fever. And now it's gone. That advantage is gone. But also, that's the only thing this deck has. Because if you look at everything else, you can get Ancillor to 25, but this deck has to run all Spellcasters and Rocks. So if you try to use Ancillor as a common beat stick, for one thing, it's going to get killed by Phantom Bind. But for another thing, it doesn't clear 25 easily because you can't run Thunder to Thunder because they're all Spellcasters. You can run Splat to put the Ancillor over 25, but that's just going to mill you even more. And if you don't get Splat paired with Ancillor, Splat just does nothing. So you might just not want to run Splat. And it's also it's a bigger commitment to tribute 2/1 monsters as opposed to summon the Thunder and discard anything from hand to clear the 25. And so, because your Ancillor is generally not enough, you probably want to run 7-Zord Magician. And, you generally want to play 7-Zord Witch with 7-Zord Magician, but you really want to play Torna so you can punish your opponents for setting 3 and passing. But if you're playing Torna and Ansler and Seven Sword Magician and Full Meteor Impact, you probably don't have room for Witch. And, like, that just hurts one of the best plays a Spellcaster deck could theoretically make. You could cut Ansler, but then why are you even playing this deck? You can play... There's also the freaking spell card, right? Explosion Road Magic. No, Road Magic Explosion. It's such a bad card. Even with the skill, I think there's an argument to just not run it. I generally don't run it. The theoretical upside is that it gives you a consistency boost. Because it can recycle your Full Meteor Impacts, it can recycle your Anslers. But the thing is, you have to use the boost before you recycle them. So if you're thinking, oh, I know what I need to clear their 2500 this turn. I should get back a Full Meteor Impact from my grave and boost it. Wait, I can't. You need some way to already clear it this turn and save the Full Meteor Impact for next turn. So it's like the main reason you use it is, oh, I need to out their thing this turn. Can't do that. You need to prepare for next turn. Who prepares for next turn? I mean, you prepare sometimes for next turn Rush Tool, but this is a Rush Tool. You need to think about this turn all the time, and you can't use it as a clear a lot of the time if you need the boost. And oftentimes you need the boost. So unless you already have the boost for something, it's just so slow as far as the recursion tool goes. And also you can't set it. You have to hold it in your hand until you need it. So if you open it, but you don't have a way to actually get a fire into the graveyard to, you know, do something with it, then you're forced to hold it. Because, like, once you set it, you can't use the boost, but that could brick you on a following turn because you really want to set it. That's the advantage of spell cards. Once you set it, you lose that. And that's the best thing about it, is that you get a card back. Because its actual effect, it's so hard to set up. It's so hard to set up. You need a level 7 or higher spellcaster on the field, and you need to a fire monster in hand to discard to do the burn damage. Like, either one of those, I think I could have worked with to do that burn damage consistently. But as it stands, for that explosive damage, Pierce is, like, almost always better. So the only reason to really play this card, even with the skill, is because of the skill. And even with the skill, it's a cycle, right? Because it's not giving you a +1. It's giving you the extra burn damage, but it's a cycle, but it's a slow cycle. So it's a slow cycle plus burn damage that's generally worse than just playing Pierce. Because like the damage you get from Road Magic Explosion is generally worse from the damage you get from Pierce. And Pierce has, like, almost no requirement. Just get one big monster on board, that's it. With Road Magic, you need to get your big monster on board, your specific big monster. Full Meteor Impact does not count. And then you also need to have the card in hand to discard. It's so bad. It's so bad. Even with the skill, I don't even play it. It's so bad. So yeah, it got me to Cog. Thank you, deck, for getting me to Cog. I wish it was better. I wish it was better. It has so many problems. There's so many problems. But yeah, so it's, you know, it's better than D tier decks. It's also better than, I would say, good stuff piles. That's what I'm going to call this. You see this a lot in gold and silver, is that, you know, players that have clearly only opened the box, like, once, they have, like, one each of all the URs. And so, like, they're playing their one Dragius, their one 7-Zero Magician, their one Gitarna, their one Yami Ruler. And, you know, maybe they're playing a couple Thunder the Thunders, you know, playing as much as they can of the good stuff in their deck. Maybe they got 2 Curry Bots. That's kind of bad. But they're playing as much as they can of the good stuff in their deck. And it's, like, fine. It can do good. It can do okay. It can certainly high roll. But it has consistency problems because it lacks a clear focus plan. And it's generally lacking in high power plays. Because if you've only done one run of the box, you probably don't have enough URs to really build the kind of, like, pressure you want to with your power plays. You might struggle to clear the 2500 mark, for example. It's just generally, it's lacking. It's like, it's okay. The good stuff deck, I think, is better than D tier, and it's better than the one other C- deck I'm going to talk about. But it's like, it's fine. It's fine as, you know, it's fine as a budget deck. You'll win games sometimes if you high roll. But as far as budget decks go, Explosion, I've forgotten the name of it. Explosion Drive. Explosion Drive is a little less budget, but if you have a lot of the necessary pieces for it, I do think it's a better budget deck than just good stuff pile. There's a reason Explosion Drive got me to Cog. I was facing a lot of good stuff piles, and I was beating them because I was more consistent. But once you get all the good cards, they're both kind of bad. But yeah. Next, the last C- deck. Okay, this is theoretical. It's Dragon's Grace. This is just theoretical. I don't have this skill. I just don't have it. I want it. I've been playing Luke a lot more recently just to try to get it. The game will not give it to me. So all I can do is rank this based on how good I think it is. And I think it's better than D tier. I think the Dragon package should be good enough that it should at least be C tier. Maybe it's higher than I'm giving it credit for. But, like, its big problem is, for one thing, it hates Phantom Bind. But for another thing, it just does not have consistent outs to 2500. Like, it has, when it gets its Dragon Sage, it can out the 2500s. If it pairs it with its 1 tributes or 2 tributes. But when it doesn't have the Dragon Sage, it is going to struggle outing those 2500s. And its boss monsters will just generally not do enough, I would say, unless you exactly draw your Dragon Sage. Now, the package is strong. Pressure is strong. Dragius is strong. The Slugger Pitcher package is strong. These are strong packages. And so the Dragons, in general, is a good enough deck that I would say it's probably not as bad as D tier. And, you know, you can high roll when you get Dragon Sage with Dragius, because the other Dragon decks cannot boost Dragius. This one can, and that's cute. But I don't imagine it's that much higher than this. Maybe it's a bit higher. Maybe it's C+ worthy. Because the Dragon package is good, but I don't think it beats over 2500 enough. I just think it just loses to that mark way too often to be much higher than bottom of C-. That's the main downside, I would say. Because Dragons, they have good skills. They have good effects. But, like, they cannot clear 2500. Not enough. Okay, so D tier. We're going to put top of D tier. Let's just put them both. There's only 2 decks left. Top of D tier, we're going to put Noodle Art Boost. And bottom of D tier, bottom completely is Strange Forces. So, Noodle Art Boost is a deck, I think, with potential, depending on stuff we get in the future. But right now, the reason it's just so bad is it has no way to naturally break your opponent's set 3 pass boards. It just can't. You can play Pierce. You can't even play Innocent Lancer. The frickin' Pyro Piercing monster you can't play in the Pyro deck. The 1 tribute can play. The 1 tribute monster you can play, Flame Champion, doesn't clear 2500s naturally with the boost that this skill gives. So you struggle a bit to clear 2500. You don't really... Even Noodle Ninja, well, without the skill. With the skill, he clears 2500 fine. But until you really get to the late game, you don't have much strong pushes with this deck. Once you get to the late game, once you have enough of those normal monsters loaded up, then yeah, you can sometimes high roll, especially if you get if you get double Noodle Ninja on the field, or if you get Elite Noodle Ninja and a Flame Champion, you can high roll and get some big damage pushes. That's the main reason I would put this above Strange Forces. But not having any natural way to break through your opponent's set 3 and pass beyond just Pierce feels so bad. As soon as your opponent knows what you're playing, they know they can just stall until they get their answer for the most part. And that's so bad. You don't want to be playing a deck like that. That is the biggest problem, I would say, with Noodle Art Boost at the moment. They need a way to break set 3 pass. And even then, because normal monsters, they're not great, right? Ideally, you want to play more effect monsters, and this deck gets boosts when it gets normal monsters. You can play 1500 good stuff, but yeah, you just do you want to play the Seahorse Carrier package? You can play just that as your only effect monsters. Do you want to clear 2500 more? Do you want to play Thunder the Thunder? It's just icky, because the more of those you play, the more you dilute the normals. You don't have to be as fast getting the normals engraved, because your Elite Noodle Ninja does naturally clear because of the skill, but it needs a way to clear set 3 pass. That's the main thing. If it had that, it would be C tier at least if it had that, but it doesn't have that, so it's just bad. But worse than that is Strange Forces. Strange Forces, I think, has a lot of potential. I think it has a lot of potential. It gives you it can recycle your recovery forces and give you a bunch of +1s. But for right now, there's just nothing to do with those +1s. There's just nothing. There's no value plays. You get your 7-0 Magician back, but if you're constantly using your recovery force, you're going to dilute your deck with non-7-0 Magicians and just not drawing enough. You only have the 3 power plays in your deck, the 3 7-0 Magicians. That is not enough. You need more than 3 7-0 Magicians in your deck as power plays. Once this deck gets more than that, I think it'll be like a real, at least C tier deck, maybe even B tier deck, because Recovery Force gives you so much +1s when they add up over time. And the attack boost also is nice when you get it with Strange, but it's mostly the Recovery Force value that is theoretically what makes this deck strong. But it's just, right now, it's just not there. It doesn't matter if you're recycling your 7-0 Magician, because Like, if you want to use your recovery forces as soon as possible to get those +1s, you're going to have to put back more than just the 7 rows missions. And if you hold off on using your recovery forces, then you're not getting your +1s, and you're kind of losing the value of the deck. You're losing the point of the deck, and you might as well just play 7/6 row, which is much better. That's why this is kind of like the worst deck right now. It just doesn't have enough power plays. It can clear set 3 pass, but it doesn't have the power plays or the high roll potential. It has some high roll potential because it's got 7's Road Magician, but it needs more power plays. It needs more, like, because at least Elite Noodle Ninja, Noodle Art Boost, they can run Pierce. They could run 3 Pierce if they need to. That's okay. They want better than that, but it's okay. But, like, this deck, it just 3 7's Road Magician is not good enough. It needs more. And that's the main reason why D tier, just too often, you're not going to get your power plays. You might as well just play 7's Excel World. So, that's the tier list. This video went on for a long while. I just had a lot to talk about. I don't know how many more videos like this I'm going to do. Probably not ones this long or this off the cuff. I have a couple other videos, ideas in mind for Rush Duels I might do. But yeah, that is where I would rank all the decks. I'm definitely going to put timestamps because this was a long video. But it's over now. Bye-bye. It's over.